Don't get too caught up in convention. Don't feel like you have to follow the pattern. I know I'm really just stretching this metaphor, sorry. Hello everyone, I'm Melissa from Knitting the Stash, and this is episode 177 in the series. Welcome to the dining room. You heard that right. This is not the yarn room, and in this episode I want to talk about taking up space in your own home, for goodness sake. I've heard from a lot of you that you use your homes in different ways, and you have trailers, or you have regular houses, or you have apartments, and you're always trying to figure out, like, where do you keep your stash? Can you work in different rooms? Can you take over conventional rooms that are supposed to be for one thing, like the kitchen or the dining room, and use them for something else? So let's talk about taking up space in our own houses. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. This is usually a podcast about knitting design and modification, a lot of garments, and we're going to talk garments today. I do have a new one on the needles, and I know I have another one on the needles too. Shh, don't tell the other project that I'm working on this one. I needed a little bit of a palette cleanser from the size 2 needles. We'll talk about that. So we will get to some garments and some design modification and some true knitting design talk, I promise. And if you are coming back to the podcast, you know that all to be true. And welcome back. It's lovely to see you. And it's nice to be in the dining room with you while I knit. If you are looking for me, as some of you might be, you can find me as Knitting the Stash just about everywhere on the internets. Here on YouTube, obviously, over on Ravelry, on Instagram, and where else? On the main website, which is knittingthestash.com. And that's where I have all of the online classes for design garment modification. And I have the Flock Farm Yarn Shop over there featuring small batch yarns from around the United States. So lots of stuff going on over on knittingthestash.com. If you're looking for me, that is the best place to start. So why am I knitting? I usually never knit when I'm doing the podcast. It's a little odd, but I actually kind of really like it, and I've always wanted to be able to do it. But one of the restrictions was always, like, I was in the yarn room, I was sitting in a kind of awkward place so that I could do the filming in the right way. And sitting here in the dining room with my project on the dining room table is pretty wonderful, because I can sit and knit and talk to you at the same time. So for those of you who have not really seen me knit very often, I promise you I do knit. And it is fun. One of the reasons I was thinking about this is because we went to the drive-in last night. We moved back to Illinois, and we're kind of near the drive-in. So Illinois has a great drive-in in Gibson City, and I think it's called the Harvest Moon Drive-In. Many great, wonderful family, happy memories up there. We took all the kids and friends, and anyway, we went last night just for the fun of it. And of course, at the drive-in, there's like that hour before it gets dark when you're kind of like wandering around and checking stuff out and eating weird food and just like throwing the football around or whatever it is that you're doing. And then everything gets really dark, and you're sitting in your car, and everybody's supposed to have all their lights out. Well, we were sitting in the car with the lights out, and I had started knitting just before it got totally pitch black, and I was doing exactly this, working on my sleeve for my sweater, and I just was really enjoying the fact that I could knit in the pitch black darkness of the car. Not everybody can do this, not everybody has to do this, but it just was a good reminder that you can pretty much knit anything, anywhere, if you want to. I'm not going to recommend like lace in the dark, but if you're just doing plain stockinette on the sleeve or on the body of a sweater, I made some progress. I think I picked up the sleeves for this I picked up the stitches for this sleeve right before it got dark, maybe at like 8:30 or something like that, and literally just started knitting on it, and it got so dark, and this is the progress I made. So yeah, so for a 2-hour movie, I got a lot of sleeve done, which is great. So, and I know, I'm one of those people that can sit and knit without looking at it too much. I don't know how you all are about that. Do you like looking at your knitting? Do you like to do other things while you knit? I guess it kind of depends. This is back to that taking up space question. Like, I will definitely sit in the living room and knit in the evening while we watch a show, or if we're with friends sitting at the table, I'll definitely knit, because I can just sit here and do this. And it's not like, you're losing, I think a lot of people who don't knit are like, you lose eye contact, you lose focus, you're not really paying attention to the conversation. But I kind of think that knitting, I don't know, it frees my mind up. I'm guessing it does the same for a lot of you, to feel like I can think about and do a lot of things while I'm still clicking away on the needles. Now, for those of you who are new to knitting, this is a skill that will likely come along with time. I've been knitting, since 2012 in earnest, I think. So, you know, a good, 13, 14 years. So I think you do get used to it. And I'm sitting here knitting on stockinette. So this is like super simple knitting. It's not cables. It's not something that I have to pay a lot of attention to with a chart or something like that. So this is your plain vanilla knitting, but I was doing it in the drive-in last night. And I was really actually curious to know what the sleeve would look like after that. Talk about taking up spaces. Your car can also be one of your spaces that you take up. And I know a lot of you do car knitting. So let's have a look. How did I do in the dark? I didn't even drop a stitch. That's awesome. So this sleeve is almost finished. And this is what sweater is this? This came out of one of the Len magazines. I think this was one of the kind of recent ones, maybe. I don't know which issue. It was 2020. It was one of the ones from 2025. And it's the Heikassa. I'm not sure if I'm going to be pronouncing that correctly. But I think you can see from the little schematic, it has a kind of tighter collar and then almost like balloon sleeves that go down to cuffs that get kind of shrunk in. And it has this really pretty patterning. Hopefully it'll show up on the camera. They call it the flower stitch. So we'll talk about this in just a minute, a little bit more, and why I've switched over to this project from my Night Groove sweater, which I also love, but has got a little tedious for me. So that usually doesn't happen. So I knew I needed a palette cleanser. But let's talk about taking up spaces just a little bit more. So I'm in the dining room, and I was also thinking about the sound, because a lot of you said the sound last time was a little echoey. So I'm trying different places in the house just to see what the sound is like. And I think this room is also a little echoey, even though we have a carpet in here. I don't know why we have a carpet in the dining room. It's a little bit strange. But the house used to have like carpets all over the place, and we actually ripped out a lot of the carpets. So we're working with a lot of just bare wood floors or underlayment like OSB or plywood. So for the next few episodes, we might get some echoey sound. Sorry about that. We just have to learn to live with what we have, I guess. But that's one of the reasons I shifted to the dining room. The other is the light in this house is really interesting. So the yarn room is wonderful. It's well lit, but it doesn't have all the natural light that you have on the rest of the house. So I wanted to test out some of the other rooms and see what what was. And for those of you who are on the Saturday Zoom, you might recognize this room because I often Saturday Zoom in from here, it's just a kind of nice space. It's very open to the rest of the house and a little bit quiet, but a lot of nice light. So this is the dining room. It is also a room where we do puzzles. I will put in some footage here. So Spencer and I, as you may have guessed, especially if you watch his YouTube, we might be a little unconventional in the things that we like to do to our houses or in our spaces. So we have 2 tables in the dining room right now, and one of the tables is like my massive old table that I came to this relationship with. Like I just had a huge table. And I love it because it's great for puzzles, jigsaw puzzles. So this room is big enough. We were living in a tiny house before, basically. The one in New York was a very, very small house. This house is much larger. So it affords us a little bit more room for our spaces, which is nice. And so we have an extra table over here. I'm looking right at it, and I can set jigsaw puzzles up on it, and we can leave the puzzles out. So like we have a puzzle actively going right now, and we could still come in here and sit down and have dinner if you use your dining room in that way. There's also a little seating area in the kitchen, which is where we usually eat. We're not big dining room people. We're trying to like see if we like that or not. So our dining room is actually used for a lot of other things other than dining. And that's kind of the way we roll with a lot of spaces in our houses that we've had over the past. We've had funny houses where you go in the front door and it's a very small house, but you open the front door and you're kind of in this entryway, which is a quarter of the downstairs. And the downstairs is very small. And you're like, well, what do we do with this room? I don't know. We tried chairs, we tried tables, we tried making it a little office. Then we eventually just left it empty because it was like, what do we do with this space? It's a transitional space. Like, how do you do it? So I think space is kind of interesting and important. I feel like as knitters, oftentimes I hear from you that some of you don't have spaces of your own in terms of like storage for your yarn, or places to, like a dedicated place to knit where you have like maybe a basket or a chair that you love or something like that, you know, in a little perfect spot with perfect light. And some of us just knit everywhere all the time anyway, but some people want to have their special spot. So spaces can be really interesting for knitters, and I think we're spatial people. I mean, especially those of us who are doing more three-dimensional garments, or socks or hats or accessories, things like that. And even those who are doing like two-dimensional shawls and things, I think we're spatial people. And we like to think about where we are and how things fit and work, and I don't know, spaces are really important. But I worry that there's this kind of like conventionality, and I see it in knitting sometimes too, where, you know, if you follow the conventions, you'll end up maybe creating a garment or in your house a space that doesn't suit you, that kind of doesn't fit. You know, it's not the right, you didn't do all the modifications that you could have done, and you ended up with a space or a garment that doesn't quite fit. And I think Spencer and I like to be a little unconventional in our spaces, just to like make use of things, you know, like take over different places where someone might have come in and said, okay, well, this is where the dining room table goes. And of course you'd put a little sidebar over there, and you know, you'd have maybe an extra set of chairs or something. And then that's all this room is used for. Same with other rooms in the house. Like a lot of you have your knitting stash in your bedroom or in your closet of a guest room, or sometimes your guest room is your craft room. Like there are all these different ways that we use these spaces. And I just think it's like worth reflecting on, trying to create these spaces that actually fit us, just like we're trying to create knitwear that actually fits us and suits us. So I am here in my dining room encouraging you all to take up space in your place of residence. Don't get too caught up in convention. Don't feel like you have to follow the pattern. I know I'm really just stretching this metaphor, sorry. But yeah, don't feel like you have to just follow the pattern. Like you can modify things, you can use spaces for multiple purposes, right? You can knit anywhere, anytime you want. I'm here to give you authorization for that. Yeah, and I'd love to know what you all think about this question of taking up space, where you store your stash, where you feel like you are the most comfortable knitting, whether or not you use spaces in your house in unconventional ways. I think it's just one of those things that is fun to talk about. We don't often talk about it, and I'd love to hear what you're doing in the comments. So leave me a comment below and let me know how you're using your spaces and how you're taking up space for knitting. So let's move on to some garment stuff, shall we? As I said, I'm working on the Heikassa. I don't know if I'm mispronouncing it. I know there are people who can help me pronounce it correctly out there in podcast land. So here it is one more time. Heikassa, something like that. It is by Reetta, Haavisto, and it was from Len magazine. And the reason I picked it up is because you might remember in the last episode, I talked about this sweater, which was, I'm doing a lot of knitting while we're moving. And yes, we are still moving. We still have some stuff going on in New York and Illinois. Anyway, so it's not a perfectly peaceful time where, you know, you can just do projects and take all the time you want and figure things out. So this is a project that I was working on while we were like driving back and forth, while we were sitting in New York in an awkward kind of like camper situation. And I ended up having to re-knit the entire body. It happens. It's often better if it doesn't happen on size 2 needles. So I think that's what I'm using, either 1.5s or 2s. I think I'm using 2s. So very tiny needles and having to re-knit the entire body and then go onto the sleeves. I was a little bit, I'm not anti that, obviously, because I do a lot of modification and, you know, changing of sweaters. But the trick with this one is that I really did need to swap my skeins on each round just to keep the color from pooling in any kind of weird way or getting striping or things like that. And once I got to the sleeves, it no longer was like good car knitting, if that makes sense. For some people, car knitting can be anything. You can do a lace chart, lace on both sides, complicated stuff in the car. You're good to go. Probably while driving. I'm not going to recommend that, but you know, it could happen. For some of us, if it gets too fiddly in the car, it's just not a space that we want to be knitting in that particular project. So for me, this one got a little fiddly because I am swapping out 2 different skeins and doing a very small circumference with magic loop on the sleeves. I just was like, no, I'm done for now. I reknit the body, I did my due diligence, and now the sleeve can just sit there. But I have been doing, I don't know if you'd call it a modification. I'm not really following the I guess I'm not following the pattern. That counts as a modification for the decreases for the sleeve. I'm just kind of going my own way. Basically doing a decrease every, like 1.5 inches or so, and I'm marking them for myself. It turns out to be like every, I want to say like 12 rounds or something. So I'm swapping the skeins in and out and doing the decreases, and the car just wasn't the place for that. So I was like, I need something chunkier and faster and something that I can see a little more progress on, because this one's stretching many weeks now, and I'm not used to sweater projects stretching that long. I know the sweater projects can take varying amounts of time depending on the knitter, but this one was meant to be a quick sweater, and then it's just kind of dragged a little bit. So I moved on to the Heikassa, and this one is, I grabbed some yarn from my stash. This was actually my D-stash. This is Highlander Heathers, an 8-ply double knit from Skeins in New Zealand, and it's crinkled up because when Skeins sends you yarn from New Zealand, they vacuum pack it. So this came, all 6 of these skeins came in a flat pack that was about this big. Amazing stuff. Love skeins. Their yarn, I've made, oh man, at least 2, 3, 4 sweaters out of it now. I really like their yarn, especially this, the Highland Heathers. What is it usually called? Southland. I think it's called Southland Sport. Is that the same? Am I using the same stuff? I might be using something slightly different. Yeah, this is the 8-ply double knit. I think it's about the same as the one that I usually use, which is the Southlander Sport, I think. Very similar, DK weight. So it's like 200 meters for 100 grams. And it's like a DK weight. It smells so sheepy. It's amazing. So when I open my project bag, like I was in the car last night, we were like eating popcorn, I'm like opening my project bag, and I opened it up and it was just like poof, like this poof of like lanolin sheepy smell. Oh, I know, like you all are with me, we just tend to smell our yarns a lot. So this bag just smells delicious right now. This sweater smells delicious, and it's a yarn that I feel like is it's like woolly and toothy. It's 100% New Zealand wool, and we know that New Zealand and Australia make beautiful wool. They just do. Good conditions there for the sheep to grow the good wool. So it's a little bit of a toothy yarn when you're knitting with it, but then once you wash it, it softens up so beautifully. Spencer's sweater, the Northlander, is that right? From Petite Knits? I think that's what it was. I made 2 of them, one for Spencer and one for Phineas. And once we wash them, oh my gosh, they're so soft. They're just, but not like what is that a word? Undurable. They're still durable. It's very good wool. So very soft, and just really I like the way that these sweaters turn out. So happy with the wool. And it was in my D-stash only because I have a lot of yarn and I was trying to like maybe part with this, but and the color wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be when I bought it. But when you buy things from New Zealand, sometimes the color is a little different. Apparently this is a good color for me. I don't know what you think, but Spencer says he likes it because it like matches my eyes or highlights them or something. I don't know, blue. I do a lot of blues. Maybe that's why. But it was a slightly different color than I thought it would be when I bought it. And I just grabbed it because I thought, well, this is kind of like a travel knitting project. I don't know how much time I have to devote to making sure it's going to come out perfectly. Just let it go. Like just knit to knit. You just want something to knit. And I love it. I'm actually very much in love with it. I love the color now that I've knit it up. It's actually not, I think I thought it was a little bit more of a flat blue, but it has some real dimension to it. I'm hoping you can see that in the light. It has some kinds of like lighter blues, almost like a purple, a gray. It's a really beautiful color. And I'm not having to swap out skeins because this is a hand-dyed yarn. This is not a hand-dyed yarn. So we talk about how yarns have like different, you can use different yarns and they all have a place and a purpose. And this one, you know, if you're going to be knitting a garment, sometimes it's really nice to just work with a more industrial yarn that you don't have to worry about swapping out skeins for. So I think there's a place for all of it. I'm enjoying just knitting and adding on skeins and not seeing any difference really between one to the other. So the yarn is great. This pattern is really quite fun. It has a this special stitch at the top, the flower stitch, and it reminds me a little bit of like the wrapped stitch that is used in like the Wool and Honey pattern by Andre Maury, but it's executed 100% differently. But you're just getting these long loops, almost like an embroidery stitch, like a, what are those called? I used to do embroidery on my cross stitch all the time, and I cannot think of the stitch. Anyway, that's kind of what it looks like. And it's cute. It provides just a little bit of texture around the collar, and then you're supposed to follow up and put those on the cuffs as well. One thing about this sweater that I will say is that it was originally supposed to be knit in a linen, it's a 70% wool, 30% linen yarn. And I think it's maybe a Norwegian yarn. I'm not positive about that. And I am not knitting in linen. So if you were knitting with linen or cotton, this would drape a lot more. And the collar, if you look at the project pages, you can really see the difference. People who use linen yarns, it turns out a little bit more like the project, where this isn't standing up so much. It's a little bit more of a, you know, a rounded, just kind of like flattened band at the top of the sweater. This gives you a little more of that. I think Spencer called it the Elizabethan look. There's also a Green Mountain Spinnery sweater that I was very much interested in that has a similar look on the neckline to what I ended up getting by using this wool yarn. And Erica pointed that out to me at the Saturday Zoom. I was like, oh yeah, there's that sweater that I really was excited about. That Green Mountain Spinnery sweater has like all over texture, so I was kind of avoiding it because I didn't want to modify the entire body's worth of texture. And anyway, but I kind of like this. I think it could be a really interesting look. I'm I'm a little worried my neck is too thin for this kind of collar, but we'll see. I gotta kind of like play it out. I think if I were to modify it or remake it, because it's such a quick knit, I think I would make the neck into more like a crew neck and make it just smaller, probably by 1.5 inches or 2 inches. And that way it would kind of just sit more snugly and be almost like a mock turtleneck rather than a kind of like open, not quite a boat neck, but a, yeah, anyway, I would do it that way if I did it again, I think. But the nice thing about this collar, you can see I got a lot of stretch in here. So the way you knit it, and then is that you create a long flap and then you fold it over, and you end up stitching it to the inside. And if you do the stitching on the inside, you end up with like such a nice stretchy collar, so you never have to worry about it like fitting over your head, for example. Whereas sometimes if you fold something over and like whip stitch it or connect it up in different ways, it can get a little tight. It can be like a hard seam as opposed to a knit seam where it's got a lot of give. So it's something to think about if you are doing turned collars. Like think about how you're attaching the turn. One of the things I wish I had done is cast on provisionally and done the turn that way, which I've done before. But you know what? I actually, this was just as easy. I had live stitches and then I was picking up stitches on the inside of the collar, right? Picking up stitches here and just knitting them together. And it creates just great, really beautiful, stretchy collar, which, you know, that can be the thing that goes wrong. The other modification that I consider doing, but and I've done before, but you could do that with this one as well, is you could just cast on your number of stitches here underneath the collar. So like you start knitting here, and you could provisionally cast those on or just cast them on and then pick up stitches later if you don't mind a seam. And then later you can add your collar, because that way you can modify it far more easily. Like right now I can't modify this without taking out the entire sweater. That's not totally true. I could cut it and do some funny sweater surgery. But I mean, like, it's not really easy to modify this. Whereas if I had started here below the collar and I didn't like what I got, I could just pop it off and put the new thing on. So anyway, this is what I got. It is a saddle shoulder sweater. So that means you get these little epaulettes on the sides here. So your increases are mostly front and back. Then you do increases for the sleeve, then you do increases for both. So you get this kind of modified raglan line, which is, I think, super more comfortable in a raglan style sweater. So it's like a raglan after a saddle shoulder. Really comfortable to wear. It does have short rows built into the back. I added a couple more short rows just to pump it up a little bit. And then I think the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the bottom, because right now the bottom, like the bottom hem, just has, it's like an I-cord or something. And while I think that's kind of cool, I-cords are great, I think I want to play around with it and see what I want to do. I don't think I want to add this band at the bottom. I'm not a huge fan of adding extra bulk and kind of like texture to right around like the hip area. I don't know that it's always that flattering for most people, myself included. So I want to do something. I'm not sure what it'll be, but that'll be in the next episode. And I'm actually making really fast progress here. I'm like 4 or 5 inches past the separation for the sleeves. And like I said, I just did this sleeve last night at the drive-in, so it's gonna be done pretty darn fast. I will say one of the things about this sweater to pay attention to, if you're thinking about making it, is the yoke depth. It's pretty good. I feel like it's, if you're in gauge, I think I'm out of gauge. I think that's one of the things. Yeah, I'm totally out of row gauge. I'm pretty good on stitch gauge. But just watch your depth here, right? So you're trying to figure out how many increases you can do to the body and increases you can do to the sleeves separately before you start doing combined increases. And you need to count your rows, and you need to know your row gauge so that you can, and you need to know how deep you like your yokes so that you can make sure, if you need to lengthen something, if you need to skip a few rest rows, things like that, just to make sure that you get to the right depth. I ended up combining, I think toward the end, I think there are increases that were supposed to be at, each row you do some of them. I ended up just combining those. Instead of 6 rows, I ended up doing 3 rows just to shorten the yoke a little bit. So just something to think about with this sweater, depending on how you like your yokes. It's a really simple, kind of beautiful classic sweater, which is one of the things that I feel like a lot of us, myself included, like I really love knitting different kinds of things, like things that challenge me, things that have a new technique, things that have like some funky element. Like if you were to go to my favorites on Ravelry, you would see so many conventional sweaters, but you'd also see a lot of really like sweaters with like a weird flap or like a different kind of construction, or just some element that would be just fun to knit, maybe not so fun to wear. So I tend to go for those kinds of things, and I think a lot of us do, but it's also really nice to just have classic kind of traditional pieces in our wardrobe, in our stash of sweaters. And both of these sweaters are pretty classic. It's like, this one has a little bit of a kind of like engagement, a little bit of an intrigue because of that collar and because of the sleeves, which are kind of like balloon sleeves. But it's otherwise a very simple knit. So, you got to break it up. You got to do a little bit of whatever you like so that you make sure you keep yourself interested in the knitting, which is what I'm doing right now by knocking out this sweater in like, I don't even know, like a week. And then I'll go back to that sweater. I will finish the sleeves. I don't know that I've ever had a sweater where I didn't finish the sleeves. So it will be done. I've had socks that I haven't finished the other sock, but sweater sleeves, I'm good for. So I will go back to that one and to my little size 2 needles. These I'm using a 7. I think the pattern calls for an 8. So the difference between a size 2 and a size 8. So I think that is actually almost it for today. It was really lovely to hang out with you in the dining room. I hope you are taking up space wherever you are. And again, let me know in the comments how you use your spaces, where you store your stuff, like where you knit. What kinds of unconventional things do you do? I'd love to know. And a huge thank you to the podcast producers, and that's Bethany, Laura, Lenore, Nargis, Jennifer, Rose, and Kendra. you make it possible for me to come sit in my dining room. So thank you. And thanks to all the podcast Patreons as well, and for the coffees. You all are just so generous and sweet, and the comments. Just love hearing from you. If you're interested in hanging out with me on Saturdays, let me know. I'll send you the Zoom info. But otherwise, I will see you in a couple of weeks. Take care. Bye-bye.